So the energy is coming in here. So getting into a routine of sun gazing is very, very important. Some human beings are going to have a more natural inclination to want to sun gaze than others and to be out in the sun. Some people are going to have more of a genetic ability. For some people, it's something that develops over time. Right now, I can't really do the deep sun gazing that I would like to, being that I was doing a live stream. But the goal that I'm creating for myself, because I'm already very, very tuned in circadian rhythm wise, even though I'm dealing with Wi-Fi and smart meters and things of the grid, I'm very, very attuned to the cycles of the sun, as well as the daily cycles of the sun. The longer cycles of the sun, as far as the 11 count cycle, I'm more active during the solar maximum years. And then, of course, the daily cycle of the sun. So one of the things that I've been meaning to talk to you about is the importance of taking walks under the sun, even when it's beyond the sun gazing period. Walking without sunglasses, although sunglasses are important, but walking and observing the light on the trees. And then you might notice, as I might notice, if you're tuned in, that the botanical feminine life is a lot more attractive. The plants, as are the humans. There's just a lot more of that prana that is there. There's a beautiful feminine energy that can be seen in aspects of humanity. And then there are those in which we see the cruelty, the lack of feminine, the lack of care, the lack of positivity, the cruelty. So it's very much like night and day as we are illuminated, right? Then there's also a lot of the paranoia that we're going to have to keep. My intentions with 333 is angel numbers. It's not to be occultic, but being that I believe in the sun and I don't believe the earth is flat, there's always going to be that assumption, right? At all times, that unless we believe exactly line for line what someone else believes, and see, what I see is synchronicity. I believe in spirit speaking to us, whether we like or not, maybe even the messages from the departed. And so I believe that we are, some of us, awakening deeply. And this is why at times I have to go into my cave, not do email, not do social media, flip off my Facebook. It's been on for a few days in case you want to talk to me via Facebook. Just look for me on Facebook. But I'm likely to turn off the account in a couple of days because I'm heavily shadow banned. And so for me, we talked about letting go in the previous video. So let's talk about the reset. Who knows if it's going to be a daily thing or event over a day, an event over a couple of years, or a cascade of events, more than likely. Some people have put the timeline at 300 years, a 300-year timeline for the earth being cleaned up. We have the controlled reset, right? We know about that. But then there's the cosmic reset, which is in control over those evil forces that control, New World Order, Illuminati, those wicked forces that control Earth politics. They have manipulated us into thinking that they are gods, haven't they? Of course, some people are manipulated into thinking that there's an ascension around the corner. Maybe for some people, there could be. I cannot deny that some of us are waking up. But not everyone attracted to that numerology is opening up their heart and showing forgiveness, understanding, acceptance, or tolerance to different opinions at this time. And that is not and making threats. That is not a vibrational frequency that is on par with evolving beyond the prison planet state of consciousness. In fact, having feuds and going back and forth, getting involved in street fights, and then having no compassion for people that want to stop human trafficking. These are all hallmarks of interference. And so we need to understand that there is something that is so dramatically contaminated within just the overall body of humanity that just can't be fixed. And so I can't fix it. You can't fix it. But we can take directive from God, from within. I don't hear God speaking, but I feel it, and I felt it my whole life. Like Morpheus talking to Neo. It's like that feeling you've had your whole life, trying to put your finger on it. What is it? The Matrix. My whole life I've had this knowing. My whole life I've had this sense of the reset. My whole life I've had this daydream of the red skies. My whole life since I was a little boy. I've thought about the robots and technology, reading the minds of mankind. What I'll do is I'll squint and I'll look at the sun and look away and just a half squint. I'm not crazy, folks. But I think that it is okay to walk around, without your sunglasses and take in the light, but not look at it directly. And that it's sunrise and sunset. That's very, very important. And I've even heard it said to beware of, the noon or the one period. I've heard it said that that's a period in which the demons come out of the sun, actually. Like the opposite. I felt some strange, intense emotions and energy doing sitting in the sun. But I believe that there is a Native American ritual, is there not, of like being out in the sun for multiple days and doing like a dance. There's something about that is attractive to me. The idea of the sun dance, as done by Native American tribes, in order to get some sort of knowledge, revelation. I could see that as even a repentance, if you will. And being really hot in either a sauna, wet or dry, or the sun, as long as you don't hurt yourself, combined with maybe some prayers and water, like sauna, tub, pool, hot tub, combined with repenting and some prayers. Also, the Kuchikuri, right, which is what this comes from, which I kind of intuitively do to bring in energies, has a associated Sanskrit mantra that I got into a few years ago, but my friend said, if you're not really well versed with that stuff, better play it safe and not touch it. But I think that certain exercises can bring in energy. They can be used for positive purposes, but as I said before, the sun gives us energy, and certain meditation gives us energy, but it can go into certain chakras. And unless that energy is distributed to other chakras, right? Then there could be, too much physical desire and thought that could lead one away from spirituality. It's also said that heavy exposure to the sun, appropriate exposure, strengthens our field. So staying away from alcohol, tobacco. And I would say that if you don't need to smoke marijuana, or you can't access marijuana, or you can't afford marijuana, and you are able to safely quit marijuana, more power to you. What I would never encourage someone to do is ever get mental health prescriptions for quitting marijuana, because those people in that field don't know about the beauty of marijuana, the THC, CBD, nor how to life coach someone into sobriety without using other dangerous drugs. Okay. And so what the system will do, what mental hospitals will do, is take people away from that. Let's talk about that briefly. The sun is what people need in those facilities, not this. And in those facilities, there's lots of that smoking, and employees basically that you can tell are alcoholics. And so there was a religious guy in there, Eduardo. He was the one that was so fanatic that my display of stretching, right, which he believed was demonic. He believed yoga was demonic and all stretching was demonic. And so when I was doing certain stretches, and I've dealt with this judgment from other people, men before, for trying to teach meditation and grounding out the chakra system and pass on the meditations basically given to me by Leon. In fact, maybe I need to start a whole new spirituality channel, because historically likes are very low on this channel. when it comes to spirituality, especially anything to do with vipassana. So actually, on that note, let's go ahead and practice being calm and in a vipassana state of consciousness to some music. How would you like that? Would you like that? Let's go back to my favorite. Been listening to this since I was 16. And let's just accept what we can't accept and let go. That many of us men and women of the many people that are in our community and YouTube audience, because we are in times now. Okay, what I'm going to show you now is something called Tai Chi wheels from HealthBeat, and the company is Landscape Structures. So Landscape Structures is a series of exercise equipment. Okay, so as we, of course, deal with the reset of the grid, right? As people may even deal with the lockdown in the future, like who knows? Like, do you have a workout plan ready to go? Calisthenics, yoga, Tai Chi, martial arts, Kung Fu, something that you can do at home, meditation, vipassana, right? That doesn't include you going somewhere else. So I'm going to show you this, but my demonstration of it.
The HealthBeat Tai Chi
This
wheels.
is short.
These are designed to work out the shoulders and lower body with proper posture. This will also give the user a way to meditate and relax after a hard workout. To begin, face the Tai Chi wheels, bend the knees slightly, and begin turning the wheels in a clockwise or counterclockwise way in a random fashion.
Okay, so I would say that the install of this, they really need to make sure this is properly installed as far as height. Having it too short, okay, is something that requires a chair. Okay, so I have to personally make adjustments. This is this is out of Australia.
This is Tai Chi wheel. It's for flexibility, mobility, focus, and coordination.
Doing this
Hand
built my
rotate, wax on and wax on. You can move the wheels in the same time or in the same direction at opposite times. You can also try opposite directions at the same time and opposite directions at opposite times. This can help with focus and coordination and can be harder than it looks.
I'd like to say hello to the people that are there and let you know that we're going to continue today's presentation by listening to the words of the late Matthew Stein in just a moment. But what I want to tell you is that I feel often in this lifetime mocked by elements of my audience if I don't look the part when I promote certain things. And I can show you plenty of videos to where there are people that you would consider qualified, pretty, attractive, of your ethnicity and of your gender, promoting the Tai Chi wheels. I can show you on the internet people of your own kind demonstrating this quality equipment. So then why am I then seen to be the off one? With, I see where it's very important that people understand that on this channel, I talk about things that are very healthy that I recommend that you seek out. When I teach you circular motion like this, as I have for years, I'm encouraging you to do these exercises, literally, not just to meditate, not just to learn about World War III, not just to learn about relationships, but to look at the various aspects of what I'm teaching you. When I say that I believe that you as a woman can learn martial arts to prevent human trafficking, and then you can develop an ability to deflect a grab, I believe in what I'm saying, and that these exercises can help bring about an internal energy that even if you're not physically strong, like a man, like a bodybuilder, through repetition of certain exercises, wax on, wax off, whatever. It's a movie, but yet there is still truth, and there are martial arts like Wing Chun that were developed for women. If you know the story about Wing Chun, it was developed for a woman to help her in a simple way fight back against a man who tried to force her into a marriage. And so when I talk about wanting to teach women self-defense and have those videos on this channel and bring martial artists to me, it's not being done with some sort of a dark interest. It's being done to help you prepare for the recent day, because ever since I was a kid, I had to believe that martial arts would be more important than guns. And I fear that some women think that just men with guns is enough.
Coach. Get out there and
That's
enjoy
what
the
I
equipment.
sense.
Remember, healthy body,
Or that MMA
healthy
martial
life.
arts without spirituality is okay. Or just doing other exercises and no martial arts. I believe that as a man, if you have a female or a family, that you should be willing to try to learn the martial arts and that you shouldn't be allergic to it. Okay, so that pretty much covers that. Now, Tai Chi 24 forms, these videos I'm going to start watching. And so what I am going to do, what I need is a female partner at some point for self-defense demonstration. And I don't know how to obtain that. And we're talking about aside. But there is a lot that I can learn from YouTube.
So here we're type of fantastic piece of equipment ability and coordination in arms and
This is a very how that's
and anti.
different.
You place your hand on the
Is
handle,
at a different height.
begin to move. You can also try spinning one plate one way and one the other. It's great for your mental agility. It's also a great piece for a warm-up or cool-down, either at the beginning or the end of your workout.
One second.
Is in building resilient homes designed to handle most disasters. Matthew has written extensively on sustainable preparedness and self-sufficiency. Matthew, author of several best-selling books, When Technology Fails, A Manual for Self-Reliance, Sustainability, and Surviving the Long Emergency, and his other book, When Disaster Strikes, a comprehensive guide to emergency planning and crisis survival. Matthew, so good to speak to you again.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be back on your show again.
Well, since we talked last in 2009, what's new with you?
I mean, the biggest thing that's new with me is I went through hell with a year and a half of my wife's declining. It took us several months to figure out what was going on. It turned out she had a deadly blood bone cancer that doesn't show in normal cancer markers. And so by the time they finally figured it out, she was close to being dead. And so
now we're going to skip to the end where we get spiritual. We're just going to listen to the intro. So stay tuned, my two viewers,
so that's
and hit that like
the
button.
biggest thing.
We're going to hear out his intro,
quite the change,
and then we're going to go
well,
to
my
random.
condolences, and I kind of picked up on the fact that you've been going through a lot the last year or so, and I'm honored that we're having this discussion now because, as you know, there's still this potential for a solar event, even though it's no longer 2012. A lot of people focused on 2012, I think a little bit too much, and got that date confused with this potential event for a solar flare to adversely impact our electric grid. Can you explain just a little bit what we're looking at now, even though it's no longer 2012 and it's 2014, and how this is still very much an issue?
Well, I never gave a whole lot of stock to the 2012 end of the Mayan calendar date. It was just, to me, it was a date that indicated sort of a time in our planet when the big shifts and changes would be kind of hard to deny, that our planet is going through some major changes and our civilization is not going to be Ozzie and Harriet. We can't keep the 1950s going forever. And I thought, in my mind, 2012 was sort of the symbol of that shift into this sort of new chapter on our planet. Now, solar storms are something that happen fairly often. They're not like clockwork. It's not like a year where the Earth travels around the sun every year and you can predict it. But statistically, over time, scientists indicate that roughly every 75 to 100 years we get hit by a really big solar storm, called an extreme geomagnetic event. Now, what that is when the sun sort of bursts. It's called a coronal mass ejection. And it's like a bunch of sun stuff goes flying out into space. And it does this fairly often. But just the space is huge. So most of the time, these coronal mass ejections go flying off in directions away from planet Earth. But every now and then they hit towards us. And when they do, we get something called northern lights and southern lights, the aurora borealis. And that's when the sky lights up pretty colors in the northern and southern hemispheres. The brighter the colors, the closer you get to the poles. Now, every now and then, like every 75 to 100 years, we get a massive coronal mass ejection that has a direct hit on the planet Earth. And the last time this happened was in 1921. And so that was like 90-something years ago, 93 years ago it happened. But it was only about 50 years before that, 60 years before that, before the other one, the 1859 Great Carrington event. Okay, so in 1859, people woke up in Colorado in the middle of the night, hikers and campers thinking that daybreak was starting. Now, fast forward to today. Well, in 1859, there was no grid. There was no highly interconnected electronic society. There was individual power plants that powered individual cities. There was no massive grid interconnect. Well, fast forward to today, we have 250,000 miles of high voltage power lines in the United States that interconnect our grid. And in order to transmit large amounts of power across this grid, we step the voltage up to called extra high voltage transformers. And we transmit at long distances at between 350,000 and 1 million volts. And then at the other end, they step it back down to voltages that cities can handle and our local transformers can handle. So the problem is that if we had today a geomagnetic storm like the 1921 one, which is 50% weaker than the 1859 Carrington event. So the scientists are basing their projections and their analysis on this 1921 event, because those happen, they estimate, every 75 to 100 years, which basically means we're due or overdue, depending on the time frame for the next one. And the big Carrington event, that happens, they figure, roughly every 500 years. And they figured that out based on ice core samplings and nitrites. And, that's a pretty
exactly. And
nasty.
it can be said that maybe some of this zombie apocalypse television programming is just that, programming to get people into that mindset of, instead of cooperating, preparing to go to war with each other. And I do find that unfortunate as well. And I can see in the last couple of years, Matthew, the influence that some of this television programming has done.
Well, you've certainly seen the militarization of the police force in the United States. People shooting unarmed people,
Right. They did a drill down in San Diego.
Questions later.
They did a drill where they simulated zombies that they had to shoot down about 2 years ago. So that was definitely very, very disturbing. So I'm with you in that hopefully we can prevent that type of a scenario, which is why I wanted to ask you what you would recommend to people in different scenarios. For example, what if someone's watching this in the city and they're not planning to go off the grid ever until there's an event that forces them outside of the grid or forces them to flee the city? I want to get your advice for those people that intend to stay in the city indefinitely. And then there's also other scenarios, say someone is able to get outside of the city and they're en route somewhere, what advice you might have for them, what they might want to put in their car. But I also want to touch upon those that either already are off the grid or have the intention of creating their own off the grid community before these events unfold.
Well, the city scenario is going to be tough because if it's long term, I mean, if it's short term, then there's no harm in weathering in the city and just having. I mean, the real thing you want to have, like in the city, is make sure you have your water drinking. Because I mean, there's the rule of threes kind of gives you an idea of what's really important. So if you have 3 seconds without blood circulation, then you pass out. And if you're passed out, provide somebody else has to fix you, or you come to on your own, or it's over. You have 3 minutes without breathing air, and you pass out. So your blood circulation is obviously most important. Like if your heart and blood aren't functioning, then you're gone very quickly. If you're not breathing or have no access to air, then you're gone really quickly. The next thing is that if you have 3 hours in extreme heat or extreme cold, you might be totally incapacitated. Now, that's a general guideline. I mean, if you fall into ice water, like on the Titanic, it could be 10 minutes and you're incapacitated. So it's a general rule. And then there's 3 days without water. And again, it's a general rule. But if you have to be active and it's fairly hot weather and you're physically active, people start dying after 3 days without water. Naturally, if you're in a place like the Sonoran Desert, you're out in the middle of the day with no shelter and no water and physically active, you might be dead within the day. So, these are just general rules. Most of us in America could live at least 3 weeks without food. You may not like it, you may not feel good about it. I know I've fasted for, as long as 10 or 14 days at times in my life. And once you detoxify from the fast, I was able to go on 3 to 5 mile runs. I once ran 10 miles after a week-long fast through at high elevation in cold weather. And I wasn't running at maximum speed, but I ran 10 miles through, with a lot of elevation gain, a lot of drop. Of course, I was a younger man, that meant quite the athlete. But I did that with 10 days of no food, no solid food for 10 days. I was able to do that. So people can do a lot of rational choice. But the problem is that in a crisis, you generally don't have that information. Sometimes you need to make split-second decisions, and it can be a life and death decision. So how do you make those decisions when you don't have the information? And so I like to teach this exercise using a real-life example. So back like about a decade or so, James Kim was a very popular guy in the Bay Area who worked in the TV station business. And he and his wife and 2 infant daughters traveled up to Seattle for the weekend for Thanksgiving. Now, after their weekend, they were headed back down the Central Valley of Oregon on Highway 5 by your place. And they were talking and involved in a conversation, and it was raining and storming. And all of a sudden, they realized that they'd had a reservation at Gold Beach, a coastal town in Oregon, and they realized that they passed their exit a couple hours back to get them to Gold Beach. And it was really late. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and they passed the exit 2 hours back, and they thought, oh, my God, backtrack 2 hours and go over the coast and then down. It'd be like 4 a.m. before we're at our destination. So one of them pulled out a map and looked at it and saw this, smaller road that cut to the coast over the mountains. And they thought, oh, we'll take a shortcut. So we'll get there at like 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning instead of 4 in the morning. So they start up this really tiny road into the mountains, and the rain changes to snow, and they get off on the side road, and it's really scary, and they realize that they're totally lost, and they don't know what they're doing, and there's no way they're going to get there tonight. So they just stop the car and go to sleep and wake up in the morning. Well, they wake up in the morning and there's 2 feet of new snow around them, and they're on this like logging road in the middle of nowhere, and so they wait a day or two, and they go through all of their food, and they run out of gas, and there's no cell phone reception, and the little kids are cold and hungry and thirsty, and everyone's miserable. So then he takes his tires off his car and he burns them, hoping to start a fire that that someone can see from all the black smoke in the tires, and that doesn't draw anybody. So then it's like 4 days have gone by, and they're in really bad shape, and he says, well, I can't just sit here and do nothing, so I got to do something. So he heads on down the river. Now, the quote rule of survival is like, follow the river and it will take you to civilization. Well, rules of survival are guidelines. So what works in one situation does not necessarily work in another. And this is where your inner guide, your inner compass is so important, because the spirit within each of us, and it's built in our spiritual DNA. It's all of those human beings that didn't have it in their DNA. Well, they died on the battlefield, or they got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, or whatever. Those genes went out of the gene system because they didn't survive. This is critical to our survival. So each and every one of us has this built within us. So, okay. So what does James? So now I'm going to tell you what he should have done. Okay. So say you're in a scenario. You can't trust your mind when it's changing its mind every few minutes. When you think, I think I should do this. And it's like a minute later, oh, no, maybe I should do that. And then, oh, no, maybe I should do this. Well, okay, time to shut up the mind, because you can't trust what it's deciding, because it's changing its mind every minute. You can't trust it. So then what you do is you offer a little prayer. If you're spiritual, maybe ask Jesus for help, Buddha, Muhammad, I don't care. Holy Spirit, we're generic. If you don't believe in any higher power, just say, please help me. And, believe me, people usually get a little bit of religion when they're in a situation like that. So you can say, accept the possibility there might be a higher power that might be able to help you. So you ask for help. Then what you do is you focus your awareness on your dantian. It's the area between your belly button and your rib cage. Right here is like an energy center of your being. And you focus your awareness there, and you're going to try and shut the mind off. You're going to be thinking in pictures, because spirit works in pictures and feelings, not in rational thought. So your rational thought is failing you now. It doesn't have enough information, so you've got to bypass it and turn it off. So it sounds weird, but you feel like you're drawing energy here into your center and breathing it out, and feel a wave of relaxation in arms and legs, and keep breathing until you feel your stomach relax. Now, situation, you might be tied up in knots. You might have to do this deep breathing for a while, and you might have to do a mantra like God is good, or Om, or Ram, or something like that, just to focus your mind and quiet the thoughts and relax. Let that pit of your stomach relax. Now you're going to think in pictures, no rational thought. So back to James Kim, what would he do? Okay, he quiets himself, he calms himself down, closes his eyes. Now he pictures himself going down the river. In his mind, he sees himself hiking down the river. Like, this is a good idea. And so then you feel the pit of your stomach. And if you feel it clench into a little tight knot, or you feel it queasy, like you're sick, kind of a nauseous feeling, it's like bad choice, bad decision. Mind says follow the river, but your body's saying, nope, bad choice. So then it's like, oh, wow, I thought that was right. So then you do some breathing and praying, you relax again. Now make another picture. Well, maybe I should go up on the ridgetop. Maybe I'll see, somebody plane flying, or maybe I'll see like smoke from a fire, the smokestack from a chimney in a house nearby, or something like that. So, that might be a good way. So you picture yourself going up on the ridge, and maybe in James Kim's situation, it's like, oh, my stomach clenches again. It's not a good choice. Well, what do I do? So then maybe he says, well, maybe I should stay in the car. And if you get like an feeling, when you picture that sitting in the car, and you feel the stomach relax, and you feel an expanded feeling, then that's a good choice. Now, so what happened? Well, James Kim went down the river, and he got wet and cold. He wasn't clothed properly for it. And he was found 2 days later lying face down, dead, beside of the creek, a half a mile up from a hunting lodge. he could have broken into. They had plenty of food and clothing, and he could have made a phone call and all of that. So he didn't know it, but he was a half a mile away from finding civilization. What happened to the wife and kids? Well, when Jameskin didn't show up, his father started calling people in the media and organized a search. They tracked down the cell phone bounces off the cell phone towers to get the general idea of where they were. They sent people out like on four-wheel drives and, you know, little Odyssey vehicles and stuff. And somebody found the tire tracks and found the wife and kids, and they were cold and hypothermic, but, you know, they were basically fine. So there was a good news, bad news story. It was tragic in that the well-known, well-loved husband did die, and the wife and kids were saved. So it teaches, though, how the rational mind can make some really bad decisions when it doesn't have good information to crunch with. And that inner compass can see around corners and guide you into that safe path. And, you know, your mind may say, you got to go this way, and your spirit may be saying, no, I see around the corner, and that's a bad path, and you got to go this way instead. And in his case, it would have been, the spirit would have told him to stay put when the mind is screaming at him that that's the chicken way and it hasn't worked yet, so why is it going to work? And you can't stay put because your family's going to freeze and they're going to starve and you're going to die. And yet that was the right action to take.
You know, when I went off the grid for 10 months in Colorado, for me, a lot of it was not about being a survivalist or even being 100% self-sufficient, but just getting closer with that internal compass. And there were just a lot of things that happened that I still have yet to write about that were like divine intervention moments, where there was a flat tire at a certain moment, or certain people came into my path that became friends for a period of time. And there was things that I learned from them. There were things that they learned from me. So it was much more of a spiritual thing than a self-sufficient or even a survival thing. And that's one of the messages that I'm trying to impart to people thinking about being off the grid, that it is more about that internal compass than the response to disaster paradigm that a lot of preparedness people today, self-proclaimed experts, are promoting.
I agree that it's the inner compass that's really going to guide you to what your path is, what your optimal solution and your optimal way through the future is, and what may be really good for a couple of years may not be. And, you know, you may need to be a part of one community or one focus for a while, and then all of a sudden that compass may be saying, okay, you've been there, you've done that, you learned these things, now you need to go in the new direction. And so being fluid and being open to listening to that is really important. And I feel like they, meaning my guidance, the spirit guides, the masters, whatever's been working with me and saving my life, all my life, have been working with me since a child and training me to listen and hear their guidance. And so, and obviously, like when I got the whole outline for the book jumped into my head instantaneously. I mean, that was something I'd never remotely thought of or considered before. A term paper in college was like a major ordeal for me, a headbanging experience. And When Technology Fails is like 30 term papers in one. I mean, I read more books to write that than my entire life. You know, grade school, grammar school, junior high school, college, and 20 years after college. All of that reading put together was less than what I read to write When Technology Fails. And so all of that organized instantaneously into my head in a beautiful, organized fashion. Far from my mental capacity, I cannot claim that as being my idea. So if it's not my idea, where did it come from? Who gave it to me? I call them the guides and the masters, or actually what I prefer to call them is the dudes on the other side.
You know, I think that a lot of people are receiving the warnings. I could see evidence of it, and as they say, no man knows the day nor the time. I have a suspicion it's not going to be tomorrow, but in our lifetimes. In other words, there's time to prepare. And what I want to ask you is, for those that are going to be going off the grid this year, some are anticipating economic collapse next year, so they're trying to get ready. Some won't be ready next couple of years, but they probably will be ready before the next solar maximum cycle, which for some reason has my focus. Solar cycle 25, not the current one, 24. What things would you recommend people do to make sure that they have all their bases covered if they're already going to be off the grid, likely by the time this happens? Some things that come to mind are questions that I've had with other people. Will solar panels as they are designed today, be able to handle a solar flare? What about the deep side?
Like,
Or do you think that perhaps you did mention superfoods and some other things earlier for healthy gut flora and many other things?
I've never seen any dried acai.
Well, this is interesting to hear because as someone that's created multimedia for years, there are those times where I'll have some coffee, even though coffee is not the healthiest thing, and I won't eat for a day and I won't do anything but focus because I'm all aligned, body, mind, and spirit on that editing project, on writing that article, on whatever I'm doing online. And it's that same energy of focus. But a part of me is guilty. Oh, I haven't eaten for a whole day, but for some reason I have the focus to get the project done because I'm not.
Well, the main thing is to detox your colon while you're fasting. And there's if you're just fasting for a day, you don't really need to do it. But any longer than that, you do. And it depends on how clean your body is. Like, if you're pretty toxic, 9 hours without food, you're going to feel like, I got to eat. And if you don't clean that colon and detox, you're going to eat because you're going to feel so bad. Once your body's pretty clean, you can easily go a day without eating. And when I met my future wife, my deceased wife now, when I met her, her mother was very, very sick and ill and bedridden most of the time. She was like in her late 50s, lived in Silicon Valley, and just really did not feel, she would lie in her room and had horrible allergies and felt terrible. So what happened was, at that point in time, she'd been to lots of doctors. She had a nebulizer and she had all these drugs and things. So she got in touch with a naturopathic doctor named Dr. Garden. And he was in his time working full time in those days in his mid 80s. Just a spitting image of health. Well, Dr. Garden put her on a bunch of cleansing fasts, and she regained her health totally, and all of her allergies went away, and she just became this vibrant, amazing person. And she's 92 now and still strong and healthy at 92. And Dr. Garden stayed healthy until his early 90s when he was in Colombia looking at a coal mine. Comfort and the company of friends and a wonderful community than pain and suffering in a Mad Max future. And so that's my vote. My vote is for a future guided by the Spirit to a best of all possible scenarios. That's my goal. That's where I want to go. And I know there'll be other people joining me in it. I hope there'll be other people joining me in it. And I hope I'm able to hear well enough that I'm a part of that and don't end up in the Mad Max. Don't pick door number 2 and end up in the Mad Max door instead of door number 1 in the nice spiritual community that's doing fairly well in spite of the world kind of falling to pieces.
Well, I believe that because of the path we have taken in this life, people like us, people like yourself, and there are many others, that we have truly made the best steps to prepare by helping others. And in a world where so many people get focused on the stuff and the gold and the dollar bills and free markets and not free markets, there is no better investment than investing in other people and trying to help other people. And whatever we put out there, I truly believe in this world, and my travels has shown me this tenfold. Whatever we put out there comes back to us. And that's something I think we should remember in these turbulent times.
Yeah, what goes around does truly come around. And you just reminded me of one more anecdote. If you've got a couple more minutes, I'd like to share it. My wife grew up in the Bay Area. She was a group of Dutch Indonesian immigrants. Her father was from Holland. Her mom was from Indonesia. And one of their family friends is this wonderful woman named Dee. She was just a beautiful, wonderful, joyful, spiritual woman. Now, Dee and her husband grew up like on a farm in Indonesia during World War II. There was a Japanese occupation in World War II, and they came to America afterwards, and they had a little bag of jewels, gold and diamonds and emeralds and rubies. And you could say, well, how would poor village people from Indonesia come by this little sack of diamonds and jewels? And well, each of those jewels was pried out of somebody's necklace or bracelet. It was traded for a sack of vegetables or grain or rice or something. And because they lived in the farmlands and in the mountains, they had food. And so when you think about what to store and stock, yeah, gold and jewels are very tradable and barterable. a lot of us don't have much money to stock much in the way of gold and jewels. And each of those gold and jewels traded for a sack of food. And before the collapse, they would have bought hundreds of sacks of food for one diamond or one emerald. And after the collapse, one diamond or one emerald was worth one sack of food. So if you don't have enough money for a big sack of, I mean, it's great. If you got, it's portable. You can bring a lot of value with you with your diamonds or jewels, but someone could also take that from you in an instant. Whereas your skills, your talents, food, you know, other things of value, big lighters, toilet paper, you know, MSR stoves, water filters, all of those things will be worth a lot if things fall apart. And they're relatively cheap to buy today compared to that sack of gold and jewels. So I just thought that's a really cool story. That, along with the women who took pity on the men and shared their foraging stuff with the guys who were focused on hunting and fishing, I'd say those two stories right there are just like, and the pit of the stomach. Those are the three that are probably the most valuable that I've shared with you in all of this time, that could really take you far in a scenario where things have really fallen apart.
Well, I'm not a gambling person, but I'm willing to bet every dollar I own that you're not big into investing in Bitcoins.
Yeah, I got 0 Bitcoins.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you're right.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew, for speaking with me. I look forward to sharing this with so many other people. Now, your website's wintechfells.com, and you have your article out there, 400 Chernobyls, EMPs, and all that is at your website. I'm going to link to that article down below. And for those listening, there's also Matthew's article on the to lead us into that, where did these from? When did they begin in your life?
Well, I've been clairvoyant for a long time. It really turned on with adolescence and all the biochemical changes that go on at that time. But I mainly dealt with spirit guides and development. And so it was a little while before I got hit with an intense period of visions. Is the only way to describe them. They were in the dream state, but I would be fully conscious as a normal person is, and fully conscious of what I was seeing and experiencing, feeling, tasting, smelling, the environment. And I really was only seeing about 12 different events in the future, but I was seeing them repeatedly, night after night, for several years. It was pretty much forcing me to believe what I was seeing. And I feel like in present time, that was 10 years ago, I feel like, you know, now it's more of, it's happening. It's not, these are future time events. I kind of sit in horror Googling Russia and looking at what they're doing each month, because these were things that I saw 10 years ago. So it's quite a concerning period for me right now with regards to the stuff that I've seen.
Nuclear weapons is the topic at hand. What have you seen?
Well, I do see war coming. Initially, I saw 9/11, a terrorist attack on New York. I saw it kind of awakening the war machines on the planet. I saw a period of silence as people took sides. I clearly saw an alliance between Russia and China. To me, I believe that alliance and some of these plans have been there before 9/11. And so the whole Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a very serious threat. So unfortunately, the next phase that I see with this war is a sudden attack. I don't think Russia is fooling around when they throw their hands up about the missile shield or Kosovo or all the other issues that they have. You know, I've been watching China arm itself over the last few years, and they've done a very good job at that. And now suddenly it's Russia's turn to start to arm themselves. And I've complained the whole time that, you know, during this time, Russia will kind of sit back and seem like a non-threat while China does the dirty work, because they have the military, they have the people to be able to do this. And as far as nuclear concerns, the visions that I've had were very specific about what would happen, because right now people count on MAD as a way of avoiding nuclear war, especially between these large powers. And unfortunately, I don't think every leader in the world, and certainly throughout history, is logical and sane per se. And so I believe they have ideas or ways to go around that. I think Russia and China just think the size of their land alone compared to the teeny tiny space of the United States is an advantage on their part. They've kind of built a case against the United States ever since, especially Iraq, but since we've caused 2 wars since 9/11, they've built a huge case. I see some Russian leader, whether it's Putin or not, I can't tell, but there is an antichrist leader coming from Russia who's going to kickstart everything. And he'll build a case against America, and he'll wage war against America. And I see Americans not even being aware of this. I see one day us waking up just like 9/11 to missiles landing in Washington, D.C. and along the East Coast. And it doesn't take long for America to fall.
Leon, there's a lot happening right now. What time period did you feel, or was there an attributed time period to this?
Oh, well, you know, I have definitely been bothered by these visions, and I would like to know when myself, and I've prayed and I've asked and tried to figure out how these things occur. And the only answer I have is I have seen a series of events that happen in a certain order. So San Francisco is due for a big earthquake. We always talk about the big earthquake, but I actually see 2 very specific earthquakes coming to the Bay Area, a magnitude 7 in the county of Marin, with the force hitting the populated area of Marin, and the county of Marin being isolated for 3 days to a week, and a very serious earthquake. And then 3 months later, a second earthquake, an 8-point earthquake that literally destroys San Francisco and destroys the surrounding cities. They'll never rebuild San Francisco. This is the fall of San Francisco. And although Katrina knocked out New Orleans, the American ego of rebuild and we can never fall still lies there. And this will be the first time where an American city is going to fall. And to me, I see that as the earth warning us as Americans to get us ready for how to live in an environment. If our environment threatens to fall, what will happen to us? And I can guarantee you, you will see on the news when these earthquakes happen, people react, because there'll be areas in San Francisco where people are looting and stealing and raping. Areas south of Market, you'll find people walking around in shock and confusion. You'll see people in total denial trying to get to work amongst the rubble. So you'll see what Americans react when their reality falls. And it's really shortly after that that I see the war start, within months. And unfortunately, I'm always feeling like it's any time. I feel like the earthquakes are around the holiday season. But I'll tell you, Russia is just scares me.
All right. That was a lot of information. Now you also have things about earth changes, and we're going to go through that as well. Are these things that are going to occur and really kick off, kind of like a domino effect, where it all kind of really starts to drop one after the other, about the same time that war is underway, World War?
Yeah, I feel they're directly connected. I feel like there's a lull in natural disasters in present time. I feel like there's still time for change. And so I feel like these massive disasters that I talk about and lots of people talk about for the end times are directly connected to war. And the more imminent it is, and the less probable that reality is not going to change, that's when these things happen. And that's why I can't really say when these earthquakes come, because my feeling is that all these types of disasters will intensify as humankind becomes more and more violent. And I think unfortunately, there are powerful people in the world. So I think a select few of people can decide when they want to do this. And if they get that set into motion where it can't be changed, that's when we're going to really start to see this stuff.
Now, for those watching this program, we did report on this program, and other programs have been discussing that if you take a look at America today, where the military is supposedly prepared to deal with a disaster, they've moved to the middle of America. They're in Colorado. They're in Wyoming. NORAD and U.S. Northcom are in the same area now, since NORAD recently moved in Northcom's bunker. I mean, they're in the same area, and there are a lot of different people out there, Leon, with these maps that they've made based on what they've seen about the future of the landscape of the continent of North America. You have one that you put up on your website. We got that graphic up now. What are we looking at here?
Well, you're looking at the areas that are hit by either the Chinese or the Russians or by natural disasters. When the East Coast is hit by earthquakes, you are going to see an exodus of people leaving California and leaving the West Coast. Seattle is also an area affected by volcanoes, and also San Diego has a 6.5 earthquake. And so a lot of people are going to be moving out of the area, and in the future, that's going to be where the Chinese troops are going to want to make landfall and work their way in. On the other side, on the East Coast, is where you're going to have the missiles landing, and that's pretty much the shock for America, and it terrorizes everyone along the East Coast. So they're going to be fleeing west, and you're also going to have corrupt people on the East Coast congregating around the Mississippi Valley area. You know, people that have dark thoughts, or people that are violent, people that find this as an opportunity to take, well, for whatever reason, not past that Mississippi River Valley area. So they congregate there. It's not a safe place. I would not want to be there.
What you don't seem to see, Leon, neither my heart tell me that that's going to happen, is some sort of patriotic revolution in the country where we take back Congress, we change things, we get the fiscal budget back on track, we bring back accountability in our government, we become more sustainable, and we reverse the things that are already in the works. You see that at all at this point?
Honestly, it doesn't even matter at this point. I mean, if you just look at Putin's attitude with his shirt off and his attitude, he has already built a case against us. China has already built a case against us. They're not going to let that fuel go. I mean, the mess that we've caused the last few years, they're going to pounce on that. So I think it just doesn't even matter what happens internally.
All right. So let's bring the conversation now to the Rocky Mountains and this invasion of the East Coast at the Rocky Mountain area.
Well, no one's going to win America in this war. So they will try, and they will attack us, and we will fall as a society as we know it. But we won't be captured. So some of the Chinese will capture people, and I feel very sorry for those people. But there's a strong brigade in the Rocky Mountains, and the Chinese that brigade. And it's a stalemate, and the war will get more complicated between Russia and China, and it'll involve the Middle East, and Japan's involved, and so there's stuff going on all over the place. So our troops and also our armed civilians are going to pull together. I see in the Rocky Mountain families, I see strong fathers who would kill to protect their wives and their children, and I see these people getting together. I also see divinity. I see angels, large beings in the earth that are calling people to these areas and preventing other people from coming in. I know people worry about nuclear war, but the nuclear aspect in this war, as far as I've seen it, is very limited and very, very specific.
I had a talk with a friend of mine the other day that's been in the conspiratorial / psychic world for a very, very long time. It's someone whose opinion that I respect. This person, and everyone has their right to believe what they want to believe, but she definitely saw divine intervention of some form stopping all-out nuclear war. As if, like, you know, and it kind of goes with what Blue Water was saying on my program last week. You know, we're going to go real down low and experience a lot of stuff we don't want to experience, but there'll be a point to where enough is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think we receive a lot of messages, I know for myself in particular, that is specific about nukes and about being protected and the creator not allowing certain things to happen. And so I was specifically told that no nuke would ever be detonated in America. I was specifically told that the rules of nuclear war, when all hell breaks loose is any country, Russia and China, will stick to conventional weapons, and they will let us know before the first strike that they will stick to conventional weapons. But they will also let us know that any country that uses one single nuke will be retaliated with the carpet bombing of the arsenal from both Russia and China. And no one's foolish enough to do that. And I know our government can be somewhat psychotic, but they're not that psychotic to risk 300 million lives just to try and scare them away from invading us. They'll try to get other countries to do that, and eventually they will get Israel to do that, because they'll see Russia coming through Syria to attack them, and they will have a deal in the Middle East. They will bring peace. When they attack America, they will force peace in the Middle East because of the oil reserves, and they know that if America's under attack, Israel will be upset, and Russia and China, I don't know the exact details, but probably through force or treaty of non-aggression, keep them from fighting during the time that America's at war. But eventually Israel will see Russia coming through Syria, and they will be the first to use a nuke to try to deter them, and they will get nuked back. I saw at least 30 nuclear explosions in Israel. It looked like a disaster, beyond the scientific calculations. They may have detonated Israelis' own nuclear stockpile. It's worse than what they think it was going to be, and it does upset China with regards to Russia, and they'll turn on each other in the very end. And in the visions...
Sir, what's your take on the world at large and how quickly things are moving?
Well, what it's really making me be is in the observer mode to keep watch on how fast they're basically programming everybody here in the United States and the rest of the world to what they want to get done. And it's like you said today, they've announced that this is the new world order. Well, Bush has announced that. They've been doing that for a long time. But at this minute, what they're doing now is loaning more money throughout the world. In the problem that they have, the International Monetary Fund, and I happen to have their accounting book, in their International Monetary Fund book itself, the first thing that I want to know what they're talking about, and that is the definition of money. Guidelines to go on. Syria has some nuclear bombs. They're all over the place. And who's their enemy right now is Israel, which is basically an interesting situation because they want to follow the biblical prophecies to get this thing going. And Israel, I'm telling anybody, if you see a nuclear bomb hit Israel in the next few months, and I think it could happen, that's going to begin World War III. Because
if this is track 2, then perhaps I'm at track 5. Try track 5.
One line of police and the protesters. There was a great surge from the back, but this seems to be the ringleader at the moment. Very
See how none of the cops even touch the guy. They don't even touch him. He's right in their face. He's kicking. He's screaming. And you see this guy. Oh, here comes the guy with the stick. He emerges. Something very suspicious about some of the stuff we're seeing at protests. And then after things like this, you end up seeing people get their ass beat.
There's another protester has emerged with a very long pole.
This is reality, and this happens to
life impacting life.
I think everybody should watch this.
Real heroes in true life situations.
It's not pretend. It's for real.
Rescue 911.
Let's go. Okay, we have a situation over here. Woman down. Woman down. See, I told you. That's what happens when you take the swine flu vaccine. It knocks you out. Seriously. I warned you. And they came by when I wasn't looking. They jabbed you.
No, you can be on TV. You're on my YouTube channel.
Hi, Mom!
Take this home.
Hi!
The reality is it is in the middle of the pandemic. So there's no way to stop it once it has spread. That is so. I have people who are EMS emergency workers who say, "Oh no, I'm strong, so I don't need to get the vaccine every year." And I say, "Wrong. You are the one, because you are the one spreading it. If somebody has a heart attack, you go take care of them, you take them to the hospital, and 3 days later, they die of influenza. Because you had it and you gave it.
What would be your role then in a major emergency? Say the next wave is very severe. What is your role in the county? What is your authority to do what?
Ask the public health officer for this county. I'm ultimately responsible for maintaining and preventing disease schedules. So whatever I have to do to get that done, and I do with commissioners. Actually, it is my responsibility, so I advise the commissioners, and just to make everything legal, we do it together. But right now, we are in the middle of what we call incident command, and actually are working with our regional incident management team, which involves a lot of the 5 district people. And we have, and that's why I was a little late, because that was our meeting this morning. We meet every Monday. If it gets much more severe, we would be meeting more often.
Do you know that 4 people just died after taking a swine flu shot in Hungary and Sweden? And it comes at a time when the German government, this is now in the news, they're getting a different type of a shot without the preservatives as well as the German troops. So the general population is giving this particular type of shot, while the government officials are being given a certain type of shot without the preservatives. Also in New York State, half of the doctors and nurses are saying, based on tests they've done on the vaccine, they are not going to take it because they believe that the shot is actually going to cause the virus to mutate. As a result, the healthcare workers in New York were told to take the shot or you lose your job. And this was actually a couple of weeks ago. So I guess my question to you is, are you aware of some of the new headlines that are emerging from people in the medical field that are opposed to the CDC's recommendations?
Well, yes, I read the newspaper just like everybody else. And,
Well, it's not all in the paper.
It's not all in the paper.
There's a lot of stuff that's not in the paper. And the internet's not all full of conspiracy theories. The AP and AFP in Europe, that you gotta do some really hard research to find out the story behind the story.
No, I do get a couple of hundred emails a day, and I get them from citizens as well who send me stuff that they can read and research. So I do look at them, and I can't look at all of them.
Right.
I am aware of the ones from Europe, and I'm not the only one. There's 26 other health officials in Washington State who do the same kind of job that I do. Some of them are even much better than I been at looking at.
At Portland, would emergency workers be prepared? As KPTV's Jim Hyde reports, that's exactly what officials were trying to figure out today.
In tents outside the ER here at Emmanuel Hospital, the staff have set up a triage section to sort out the seriousness of the injuries caused by terrorists. Terrorists set off an explosion in downtown Portland, but so as not to bring the center to an actual halt, Portland International Raceway, with a mock-up of downtown, stands in during this drill. These come by bus, car, ambulance to Emmanuel. They need to be cleansed of the toxins from the fictional dirty bomb.
Chest injury here.
Then the emergency care staff try to what's wrong with them. Not only the wounds that are visible.
The explosion was horrific. I think they're dead.
High school student actors play some of the victim roles. Other volunteers from the community, also sporting garish wounds worthy of the best Halloween makeup artists, stand in too. Hospital staff say they're taking it seriously.
It's a little overwhelming, but at the same time, we've been trained. I'm an emergency room social worker, so this is part of the job. This is what we do day to day, and then it's just kicked up a notch today.
The wounded and burned just keep on coming. At OHSU, Portland's other trauma center, some role players show up with an attitude of wanting to help their neighbors learn to deal with such a mass casualty event.
It took a bit of time for the paramedics to come and get to us. I think in that time, if I was capable or able, I think it'd be really good to have the training to treat others around me and just try to get them stable until they can be seen by the professional.
The people portraying the injured in the Portland event are working in conjunction with disaster drills in Phoenix, Arizona, and in Guam. Homeland Security Department spokeswomen call it the biggest such exercise ever. What counts for the folks volunteering and working here is how well they and their neighbors are dealing with the trauma.
I think we did very well. But every exercise is really about assessing how you can do better next time. And I think this has been really invaluable.
The exercise and evaluation of the performance will continue into Friday in hope of being better prepared for the real thing. Jim Hyde, 10 o'clock news.
Homeland Security gets put to the test in a big
And now
drill
for
today.
strippers.
It's a disaster drill in Portland. Look at it.
Yeah, blow some stuff up.
That explosion, America's largest ever terror drill, was underway.
Okay, so
Emergency
how am I coming through?
responders and rescue teams gathered this morning
Okay,
to test their
so
preparedness.
I'm going to go ahead
Some
and narrate over
observers
this.
noticed a few of the
I went to this
responders
drill in
had failed to wear
2007.
protective
It took
breathing
place around
equipment
August.
and said
And that information that I shot here on community media,
where they were taken for
if you've never seen it, you can look online, type in Alex answering top hour.
We had insufficient number of radios.
The next video is footage that I shot in David Douglas High School. And Michael Chertoff came to visit, who at that time was the head of Homeland Security. That guy looks like a gremlin, especially when he's photographed. David Douglas High School. You had all these different members of the military, military branches, Secret Service. There, you had just so many different people were there. Yeah, that's the video. That's it. And just go ahead and through the video, you get as many visuals. You want to show like the type of people that are there. And we'll just give people an overview so you see what's going on here. What do you see? This is a massive military operation in a Portland, Oregon high school. And what are they doing? And look how concerned they are. I mean, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of tension in the air. The parents of David Douglas High School weren't told what was taking place. Allegedly, the kids had to take home slips that their parents had to sign. But were they told what was going to be taking place? Were they told Michael Chertoff, the gremlin, would be there? Were they told that all these other creepos would be there? Were they told that in the drill, get a photo op, lady. Yeah, with a real hardcore killer there. Yeah, isn't that sexy? Yeah, but why don't you go put on some zombie stripper makeup? Yeah, you'll do good in the Portland underworld. Oh my God. Just all getting the uniforms next to the kids and the kids next to the uniforms. Now, as we'll try to show here and scroll forward, you've got kids, there we go, manning the checkpoint. Those are high school students manning a radiation checkpoint. And there's other clips where, you go to, Emmanuel over here, not too far from PCM TV. They had a radiation washdown area where you go in and you strip your clothes off and you get sprayed. Oh, yeah. And here I am talking to the principal of David Douglas High School. And he tells me not a single parent complained. Let's just play a minute of audio.
Yeah, how about that? Did you officially invited to you?
We were invited to participate.
Oh, this stuff gets me worked up.
So your name's Randy Hutchinson. What's it been like trying to organize around this?
From our perspective, it's been fairly normal procedures for us.
All right.
We've had an opportunity to participate in this. We were asked about in March and confirmed
Now,
in August that we would be
coming back.
Site. And from that
Kulingoski, Pet Kulingoski, is the former governor of Oregon. Boy, oh boy, does he look like a shyster. Boy, does he have skeletons in his closet. Didn't he work with Neil Goldschmidt, the pedophile, with a 14-year-old girlfriend? So Kulingoski speaks, and he speaks of succession of government. Go ahead and roll that clip.
This
And I need
is
audio in
a
studio.
great education for me. I'm actually going to fall into a trap. If something serious is going to happen to me, and I'm going to have to trigger the succession clause of the Constitution, who becomes the governor in a time of emergency. And it's an interesting exercise. I've been told the only thing I have to worry about is when they start putting the gloves on and those plastic latex things.
This sounds like a good time to go back to some of that stock footage of the Portland zombie dance. But, play a little electronica music, just have a little, sound effect of Kulingoski saying succession of government.
The succession clause of the Constitution, who becomes the governor in a time of emergency, and it's an interesting exercise.
Have people twerking and have sounds of helicopters flying over, and maybe people twerking with the helicopter itself. they're just all different. You can look at Rihanna, the Grammy Awards, where she walks up on the stage like all sexy like with like an army of stormtroopers behind her.
This has been about 20 months in the making, and Oregon and Portland were among the communities that sought to be part of the program. They cooperated with us extensively in the preceding 20 months, and they were integrated into a scenario involving supposed radiological devices or dirty bombs. Activity not only here in Oregon, but in Arizona and in Guam, as well as at sea. And Portland actually participated in the exercise with the most intensity, with a lot of actual real world as opposed to tabletop element to the exercise. And I appreciate the hospitality and the hard work, and valuable. And I'm looking forward to working with you on the after action. We have done these exercises every 2 years for the past 8 years. This is the largest. It involves 15,000 people who are playing at one level or another. Some of what is involved will not be visible to people here. Obviously, you've seen the response element, you've seen the investigative element. There was activity in Arizona, there was activity in Guam, which also involved Pacific Command. There was also, as part of the exercise, a simulated interception and search of a vessel at sea. There were intelligence elements to the game that required the analysts to analyze information and try to characterize who's responsible for the attack. And of course, we played it in Washington at the cabinet level as well as at the state and local level. So all of this is part of that single exercise. We will pull together what we call an after-action report and probably circulate an executive summary of that to the entities that have been involved, the partners at all different levels, within the next 2 to 3 months. Then there'll be a more in-depth report with some back and forth that will be presented to the partners and the players over the next 6 or 7 years. Before I take questions, I anticipate a question that we often get asked, which is, when do we release all this detail to the public? And if we're not going to, why don't we? I'm sure there'll come a point in time there'll be some generalized discussion with the public about the outcome of this. But I think it's also going to be apparent as a matter of common sense to the public that we don't necessarily want to reveal all of the weaknesses or vulnerabilities we've detected and put it on the internet, because among those who participate in reading the internet are bin Laden and all of his henchmen. And if I wanted to send him a list of targets, I'd send it directly. I wouldn't put it on the internet in order to get it there. So obviously we maintain the details, but we do share all those with the actors at the federal, state, and local level. We've had the Inspector General present as an observer, and we've had GAO, which is the investigative arm of Congress, present. So Congress will also have visibility into what worked and what didn't work as part of this process. And with that, I'll be happy to take some questions. If you have questions to others here, tell me to whom they're directed. Please try to keep them on topic. I'm sure there are all kinds of interesting topics you'd like to talk to people here about, but they don't have to do with this exercise. So go ahead. Well, obviously the military ran as part of this exercise some parallel exercises relating to this scenario. There are exercises run all the time. I think if you want to talk about other exercises and geopolitics, I think that falls in the category of off topic. So I'm going to try to confine myself to the exercises that deal with this particular scenario. We do have defense actually coordinating, though, exercise activities for the Defense Department as part of this effort, which I think makes sense.
Is that accurate?
No. If I must tell you, and this has had a different impact than I thought, Mr. Secretary, because this is in the line of communication. One of the things that on the state level we wanted to do was to look at the Oregon succession statute about how, if during a natural or emergency or disaster that the governor became incapacitated, how do you move to get the Secretary of State, who is the next in line, into position? None of us had ever gone through this exercise, and it had never been implemented. In fact, if you look at the history of Oregon, it wasn't the last time this succession issue came up was in 1947, when I think it was Governor Earl Schnell and the President of the Senate, who at that time was the next in line, and the Secretary of State, who was third in line, went on a duck hunting trip down to Klamath Falls, and on the way back, their plane iced up, and all three of them were killed in a plane crash, and no one actually knew what to do. And if you go back in history, the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Oregon became the governor. We wanted to see the statute and how it's operating, and what they did is they did come in, because what's required, the members of the three committees are the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the President, the Chair of the Medical School, and the Director of the State Hospital. They all came
and then became a national speaker for the British Green Party. Then I had some amazing experiences, what you might term spiritual experiences. But anyway, experiences that were not the usual experiences that people have. And it basically lifted the veil from my eyes, and I started to see the world in a different, completely different way. And I started in an incredibly synchronistic journey, where I would come across information, people, situations, experiences in an extraordinarily coordinated way that was putting information in front of my face. And what I started to do was connect the dots. There are many things going on in the world, many different conspiracies, many manipulations, many engineered events, many engineered forms of control, whether it's control of finance or control of the media, whatever. But when you connect the dots, you realize that all roads lead to a network of interbreeding families that go back to the ancient world and call themselves the Illuminati. And the whole picture started to unfold, and I've been doing it now for 15 years full time, and you know, the picture is really starting to become clear, not least because the agenda of the Illuminati, which is a global Orwellian state, is in front of our eyes more and more with every passing day now. But the greatest form of control, actually, is not an overt dictatorship like fascism or communism. That is a very efficient form of control for a while, but it has a major flaw, which is that the people being controlled know they're controlled. And when you know that you are controlled and who the controllers are, then you've got a chance of doing something about it. And eventually the desire for freedom will bring situations like that to an end at some point. It might take some time, but it will happen. The greatest form of control is the illusion that we're free. That's the kind of control that they've created in what we call the democratic world. It is a few controlling events while giving the impression to the people that they are free. Now, what is this freedom? This freedom is putting a cross on a piece of paper once every 4 or 5 years, or in America, pressing some button on some electronic computer system which anyone can decide how you're going to vote, and we call that freedom. People do think they are. You know, it's what I call in the prison without the bars. You know, you sit in a cell with bars around you. You know you're in a cell, but if you sit in a cell and you can't see the bars, then you think you can get up and go where you like whenever you choose. And what is happening now, and the reason that so many more people are waking up, and it had to be like this. It wasn't, people, you know, weren't going to wake up until more and more this Orwellian centralized fascist state was actually increasingly in our face. And what's beginning to happen as a result of all these things, changes in legislation since 9/11, which have taken away basic freedoms, imposed more and more control, more and more military involvement in law enforcement, etc., is basically we're beginning to see the bars now. And as we do...
Yes, it's good to see Sam. She's doing good.
It doesn't happen here.
When
I
do
just
you
gave you
invite foreign troops to the United States? Name them. I guess I'm curious. Name the foreign troops that are brought into the United States now. You imagine.
3 months ago, 95 countries trained to invade Tampa, Florida. That's the answer to your question, Stuart Oates. Where's the foreign troops? You can find it on NATO's YouTube channel.
And special forces operators from different countries. Only volunteer. I wanted to do whatever I could to be this. Obviously, to get the chance to fire a 50 caliber was pretty cool. The ultimate boy toy.
It's going to be a point we are going to try to develop and see if we can expand this experience. I think it's a good experience.
Get down! Get down!
They will execute a hostage rescue mission against fortified enemy position. This assault force consists of personnel from Brazil, Canada, Jordan, Norway, Poland, Thailand, and the United States.
Just to inform you a little bit.
Good job.
Thank you. I didn't interrupt your live stream. I hope you look into it. You guys look so nervous when someone outside the mainstream media walks by. It's like you guys are feel guilty or something, that there's like propaganda going on down there. Innocent civilians in the Middle East die unnecessarily. It's funny how like people get nervous when bullets around. So it's like they're almost afraid someone's actually going to start telling them the truth.
MSNBC, you can't do interviews. Shut it down and make this got to go off the property.
Okay.
Right now, shut it down.
All right. Wait, you saying because I'm not pressed, I can't be up here?
Right. Unless you're pressed, unless you're working for MSNBC, there's no private interview.
Is this like area up here?
Yeah, this is all
I didn't know
private
that. I just went to get some food up here.
Yeah, this is all private.
I haven't been shouting from down there.
No, they said something about you trashed out somebody when they walked up the stage or something.
No, I didn't. I said, Chris Matthews, why'd you demonize Stuart Rhodes? I'll tell you this as so as we're walking down. 3 months ago, they trained troops from 95 different countries, right? And like this mock foreign troop invasion. Stuart Rhodes, a member of the Oath Keepers, which is former military and active duty military that won't uphold unconstitutional orders, right? You know where all this goes.
Right.
And he demonized them like he was a terrorist, like a domestic extremist. And I felt that wasn't fair. And I saw him, right? He's not on the air. And that was my moment to get that in for 15 seconds, you know? And I feel like there should be accountability and let the soldiers show. So he didn't, and I don't expect him to, and I wasn't going to use his megaphone here. I'm not trying to get myself in trouble. I actually have this with me because I was demonstrating earlier. But I just was talking to this guy up here, and we were talking about Occupy. So, well, Alex Hansen got himself in trouble. I've only been here a couple of days. I tried to earlier, but apparently, well, this guy's been fairly professional. I got to go off the property. I got to go off the property, all right? So are you? I have evacuated. They have evacuated the answers off of the MSNBC. Cheers! Hey, Mom!
There's obviously a lot of changes taking place in the solar system, but the focus of this presentation, and all that was the preface for what we'll get into now, is how human beings are affected by these changes. Emotional states. Pattern recognition is what we're looking at here with the connection between peaks in solar cycles, solar activities, times of solar maximum, and the launching of new batteries, wars, conflicts, false flag events, specifically at certain times. And we're going to be looking at a number of individuals that have information about the quantitative information that everybody has access to in terms of these solar cycles. And Alexander Chavinsky is one of the most historical figures He was an acclaimed scientist in Russia who studied the biological effects of the sun and the universe. In particular, how mouse changes in human behavior correlated to sunspot cycles. In 1915, he started to look in this direction at the effects of the sun. He spent a summer observing the sun and first hypothesized the effect of periodic changes in solar activity on the organic world. In 1916, he entered the front lines of World War I, and it was there that he first discovered that battles tended to wax and wane with the strength of solar flares and geomagnetic storms. He constructed what's called the Index of Mass Human Excitability, which traced the incidence of wars, revolutions, riots, expeditions, and migrations from 500 BC to 1922 AD. And he was jailed for his research by Stalin in 1942. He asked Shevetsky to retract his writings on solar cycles, which contradicted Soviet theories of the reasons for the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917. So he did 8 years in a forced labor gulag called that 8 years of Soviet rehabilitation, where he then conducted scientific work in the coal mines. Of course, Russia did commemorate Alexander Shevetsky, but it was a little too late. But his research spawned other studies. For example, Raymond Wheeler from the University of Kansas confirmed that the pattern, in fact, does span human history as far back as 2,500 years. It found that intense magnetic upswings directly affect the human brain and at times drove mankind into deadly emotional tantrums and frenzied killing sprees. He also wrote a book entitled Climate, the Key to Understanding Business Cycles. Edward Dewey found his information and statistically analyzed it. He's the founder of the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. Dewey validated the existence of these war cycles, and he described the 4 components of Shevetsky's 11-year cycle and their appropriate links. And this kind of illustrates the 4 cycles. The blue section, the yellow, the red, and the yellow again. Dewey wrote in 1970 that knowing that wars have a cyclical nature related to sunspot cycles implies that they have a common cause, and therefore they are predictable. If so, maybe they can be avoided. But for the powers that be, and their perspective on things, events can be staged. People can be manipulated, especially if they're out of balance and out of alignment with their own truth. Dr. Robert Becker and Dr. Friedman also looked at this information and found that more people flip out at times of increased geomagnetic activity and that there was an increase in psychiatric hospital admissions. Now, Carol Moore has a website entitled Sunspots and Activist Strategy, and I'm going to read a quote that I feel is very pertinent to what we just discussed and also where we could be going. Governmental leaders often respond to mass protests by starting wars to unite the people and suppress dissent. Also, they themselves may get caught up in the mania of negative ionization and launch irrational wars. Activists since the 1960s, like myself, have lived through several sunspot heights. From 68 to 71, 79 to 82, 89 to 1992, and the 2000 to 2003 periods. We can look back on our own experiences of several years of frenzied activity with big meetings and big protests, when the least indignation might lead to riots, rebellions, revolutions, civil wars. And we can remember other periods of years where once vital organizations declined or died. Meetings and protests were fewer and smaller, and lethargic people seemed to be willing to endure repression. Then, just when few remaining activists were in deep despair, a magical resurgence of activity. If governmental intelligence agencies are on their toes, they have bookmarked this page, and they have experts studying the effects of sunspots on activism so they can squelch or even redirect such energies when they rise again. There are many examples of this. So it's hardly silly for activists also to look at the evidence that these cycles have influenced all of human history and to learn the implications of these cycles for activist organizing today and in the future. I've been talking to this guy over email for several years, and I feel that the work of Dr. Burl Payne needs to reach a larger audience. And I'm hoping that through this presentation, more people will look at what Dr. Burl Payne has been researching for several years, actually since the 1970s. Dr. Burl Payne is a PhD in psychology and a master's in physics. In the 1980s, he found that the start of the warring behavior occurred on the ascent or the descent of the sunspot cycle, and that the physical mechanism to trigger this was changes to the Earth's geomagnetic field, which affects brain rhythms and hormone balance of sensitive individuals. This is an illustration of that concept. This is a chart that they created, showing where conflicts, some of the conflicts beginning solar activity. You can see here examples of conflicts beginning after the peak of solar activity. So Burl Payne suggests that men have their own cycle. We know that women have a cycle that's connected to the moon. It's called PMS. And Burl suggests that men that are out of balance may have their own cycle called MMS, or male macho syndrome. And he believes that during this point in time, through an increase in solar activity, solar energy, that men receive an increase in testosterone in their physical bodies. He writes, quote, wars can be called a mass psychosis or a new disease, which is not caused by bacteria or a virus. If warring behavior is perceived as a previously unknown type of mass psychosis, then the means for dealing with it becomes different than those traditionally employed. And those means have not worked very well. It gets even deeper in his book, Planetary Influences. He observed that when Mars, Venus, and Mercury were near the Earth at the same time period, more sunspot numbers were likely to form, and more wars were more likely to start. If the sunspot cycle was on the ascending or descending part of the 11-year solar cycle. And he found that there's a correlation 85% of the time between periods when planets are relatively near the Earth in the production of sunspots and other solar activity. There's also a quote from a famous metaphysical teacher called George Gurdjieff, who said in the 1940s that war is the result of planetary influences. So we're now going to go over the evidence, the historical events that have taken place in different solar cycles, beginning in the late 18th century, around the time of the Revolutionary War. And we're going to have to abbreviate this for time. But what we can see in this particular chart, and there's many charts, it would take a half hour to get into all the things that took place between 1770 and 2013. But we saw events that led to the American Revolution in sunspot cycle number 2. In sunspot cycle 3, we see the American Revolution, we see the U.S. Constitution, and the third solar cycle. Solar cycle 5, Napoleon conquers Europe, 1803 to 1806. And a lot of other things taking place in Europe. Solar cycles 8 through 10. And we see events that led to the Civil War, for example, in the United States, which ironically started 2 years after the 1859 Carnington event, where the grid went down. The grid that did exist at that point in time. We also saw revolts beginning in India, Italy, and China. Solar cycles 11 through 13. U.S. labor strikes, revolts in Sudan, First Indian Congress meets, 1893 to 95, Zulu Revolt, Cuban Revolution. And we see events that led to World War I, solar cycles 14 through 16. And as I said earlier, solar cycle 14 was double peak, as they're projecting that this current solar cycle could be double peak, 2013 and 2015. 1914 to 1919, First World War, Irish Indian revolts, Russian Revolution, and the atom split. In 1929, by the way, during the peak in sunspots, the peak of the solar activity, we saw the Great Depression. We saw the stock market crash, rather, that led to the bottoming out of the Great Depression around 1933. During the same time period, we see Mussolini and Hitler rising to power, built on economic unrest and other revolts. Formation of the Red Army, more mass civil disobedience in India. Now we're looking at events that led to World War II, solar cycle 17 to 19. Spanish Civil War, Germany and Japan start World War II. Japanese rape of Nanking. Mass civil disobedience in India. U.S. still struck, 1947 to 1953. We see the Greek Civil War, Israeli-Arab War, India-Pakistan riots, Red Army wins China, Vietnam revolts. Flying saucers start becoming more common throughout the United States. Following Project Paperclip. There's also a crash of the flying saucer in Roswell during the peak of that solar cycle. The CIA was created out of the OSS, and we saw the launch of the Korean War. And we see other events following that. The late 60s took place during solar maximum, solar cycle 20, 1967 to 1969. And by the way, these years that I'm reading, that's the years that we have the peak. It usually goes from 3 to 5 years. Each solar cycle, it varies. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's a little bit longer. How did the Vietnam War, peace demonstrations, worldwide student uprising, Czechoslovakian uprising, USSR invasion, in U.S. inner city riots, Israeli-Arab War, Woodstock and height of hippie movement, uprising in France, Prague spring mood landing, MLK and Bobby Kennedy assassinated. And there's a lot more things that take place in the next cycle. For example, when Afghanistan was invaded by Russia, it took place during solar cycle 21. The Iraq-Iran war began during that solar cycle. The Shah of Iran was overthrown. In the 1988 to 1992 period, we see a number of other events that are extremely historic. For example, the USSR begins to pull out from Afghanistan, and we see the staged collapse of the Soviet Union. The Tiananmen Square incident, dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Gulf War begins. All during solar cycle 22. And the next solar cycle 23, and there's a lot of things that started to kick off as we approach the millennium point in time. For example, the WTO protests in 1999, and other protests that were starting to increase at that point in time, and yet 9/11 hadn't even happened yet. But already the masses were reacting to these changes that they were feeling in their bodies. We saw the worldwide Y2K scare. Heroin overdoses skyrocket in Portland. Bush is given the election by the Supreme Court. And the 2001 to 2003 period. September 11th, 2001. Well, if you use that typo there. So-called war on terrorism begins. Invasion of Afghanistan. Patriot Act signed into law. The invasion of Iraq. Again, these aren't wars, these are invasions. And of course, mass protests against the war. Before they invaded Iraq, as well as record numbers of protests, as well as afterwards. We started going to the minimum. Alternative media continued to 2001 to 2002. We can see from this chart that solar activity starts to ramp up right before 9/11 and continues to maintain its strength throughout the period of time where they invaded Afghanistan. And it starts to decline slightly in activity in 2002, but this is still the center of the maximum portion. We started going to the minimum phase around 2003, 2004. This is what we have seen in the last couple of years. Number 24. Descent in Tunisia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. Obama overthrows Libya. By the way, day that Bush attacked Iraq. Bush attacked Iraq March 19th, 2003. Libya was struck March 19th, 2011. And of course, we started seeing media coverage of protests all over the world, not only in the Middle East, but Europe, China, and many other countries, and the United States, not limited to Occupy Wall Street. Also during this period, we saw Fukushima. In March of 2011, President Barack Obama signed the NDAA, Syrian Civil War. North Korea, the controlled wild card, points missiles at South Korea and threatens Hawaii and Japan. And of course, after the biggest solar flare this year, that took place on April 11th, 2013, we saw the Boston staged false flag bombing. Engineered at a specific point in the timeline where people are most likely to react emotionally with fear to such an event. So there are also tools with economic cycles and the sun. And this chart was put together by Michael Manderville. And the arrows that I put here indicate the recession periods. So here we see on the left side of the screen, we see the Great Depression, which began during a solar peak. And we see other events, other recessions. This chart is 1986 to 2003. And we see the Bush Senior recession right here, and the dot-com bubble bursting right here. And when I looked at this chart, a couple things came to mind. Because during solar minimums, there's less human activity, or as Stravinsky calls it, human excitability. So when I saw that in 1913, there was a record low numbers of sunspots that occurred in that year. That was the year the Federal Reserve was created. If we look at 2008, that's when the banker bailout was initiated. Also a record low sunspot count year. Less activity, less expected response, expected protests, more times to launch things when you don't want people to react to things that you launch. So they use the maximum cycle, and they also use the minimum. And notice how Occupy Wall Street took a couple of years to get moving after this 2008 launched the banker bailout scheme. In late 2011, sunspots increased, and that was around the same time period we saw an increase in protests and other things. So this has also been discussed by Forbes magazine, who published this headline in 2011. Riots, wild markets, do space storms drive us mad? And believe it or not, we were just talking about the Federal Reserve. They quote a study that the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta conducted in 2003, where they found that such storms could affect the stock market, as traders were more likely to make pessimistic choices. Their report states that unusually high levels of geomagnetic activity have a negative and statistically and economically significant effect on the following week's stock returns for all U.S. stock market indexes. In addition to changes in the economy, cycles of war, there are changes that we see within the climate, even though this is not being admitted by the UN's IPCC, because it violates their official view of what's causing global warming. But here's an equation provided by Mitch Batros as to how sunspots affect the climate. Sunspots affect the solar flares, which affects the magnetic field, which affects shifting ocean and jet stream currents, which causes extreme weather and human disruption.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is August 4th, 2010. This is a very special video report on the CMEs, the coronal mass ejections, the solar flares that are actually impacting Earth right now. No, it's not the end of the world. It is actually, though, the beginning of many changes coming to our world. On Sunday, August 1st, 2010, not 2, but 4 CMEs were detected being ejected from the sun, heading directly towards planet Earth. Beginning last night, we saw one flare hit the Earth, creating the aurora borealis effect throughout many parts of the country, many parts of the world. And in fact, tonight, on the 4th day of August, we're about to see more CMEs. The event has sparked controversy and debate around the internet. Is this the end of the world, or is this something completely natural? As someone that's been studying solar flares for about 2 to 3 years now, I feel it's important that I make this video the beginning of a series of videos about this very important subject, this change to our world, but not the beginning of the end of the world. There is some disinformation out there, and I got to clear up some things just to make sure people are aware of what's already been discovered previous to this particular event. I wrote an article called Sunspot Cycle 24 and the Earth's Weakening Magnetic Field about 2 years ago. noting and documenting the scientific claims and facts that the magnetic field has holes in it now, and that as recently as several weeks ago, they've detected major changes with our Earth's outer atmosphere, the thermosphere. And so what happens when we have changes to our magnetic field, the very thing that protects us from gamma rays, asteroids, things of that nature, is that we have a thinner veil. That means more things from the sun, different types of radiation, different forms of energy can actually get through, penetrate the Earth's magnetic field and affect us. Now, in this video, I'm going to ask that you keep an open mind and start thinking about ways that we can be affected by solar flares outside of a negative way, outside of something that could be called disastrous, like a massive earthquake that kills millions of people. What could be some of the positive effects of solar flares? And if you look at different tribes throughout history, if you look at man's understanding of the sun, if you look at the very fact that man has had many sun-worshiping societies within it, it does raise the question, what is it about the sun and solar maximums that are looked on as a positive thing throughout society? Sun is constantly attributed to the very thing that gives us life, that allows the light to come into this, that provides the light in this world of ours, that produces the food, that gives the plants the fuel that they need, the energy that they need, photosynthesis, to keep our hearts beating. The important thing is to look at the future, 2012, with a more objective perspective than a doomsday end-all mentality, or the other extreme, the perspective that what's coming is not going to affect us at all, our world that is. And the reality is, yesterday's solar flare affected U.S. Bank. It's in the news. There already were bank failures today from a very small, considerably small.
Up Ninth Street and took a look through the Italian market here in South Philadelphia. Then I took Alex up to the South Street area. We looked at some of the shops up there, ran into a couple of my friends up there, which was very synchronous. We encountered synchronicity along the way, which was nice. And we're just walking along East Passyunk Avenue now, heading back toward my house. So along the way, we encountered some interesting dynamics. We stopped at a thrift store that had a lot of used books. I found a book that I don't think I'm necessarily going to agree with the premise, because I think it's kind of like more atheistic based. It's called The End of Faith: Religion, Terror, and the Future of Reason. I'm going to check it out just to see, because it was for free. I found it in a... Go out on the street or ask your neighbors or your friends or your family members, are you a slave? Just ask them that simple question. Are you a slave? And I guarantee you 100% of them will say, no, I'm not a slave. And then just, the response to that should be, you just made the claim that you're sovereign, that you are a sovereign. And, this word has some kind of a stigma attached to it because people don't understand what the word means. We don't even know the meaning of the words we speak. The word sovereign comes from Latin. The first part of it, S-O-V-E-R. It comes from the adverb super, S-U-P-E-R. P and V, along with B, they're kind of used interchangeably in many cases. In classical Latin, you'll often see, you won't see the V character. It's not really present in classical ancient Latin. So, that's rendered with a P. Just like in the word government, the derivation from gubernare, there's a B in that instance where in English you would have a V. You would render it as a V. So the word super in Latin means above or beyond. And then the second part of the word reign comes from Latin regnum, the noun regnum. Regnum means worship, as in or that's what the word regnum means. So you put them
This is the police state, but we will change.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
Because not many years ago, you know, I was struggling to fill many seats with people who wanted to hear this stuff. But over the last, particularly, I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe I can look back to 9/11 as one turning point, and the invasion of Iraq is another one. And then after that, the increasing Orwellian impositions around the world have focused people's minds on the fact that the world is not like they thought it was. It's not controlled by the forces they thought it was. And if we don't address it, and address it now, then we're going to get overwhelmed by the speed of change that is in the pipeline.
Before we go to break here in about a minute, just give us some additional information about David Icke.
These subsidiaries make it happen. This is why when I've been to about 50 countries now researching this and talking, and you see the same things happening around the same time, justified, invariably, in fact, justified by the same reasons or problems. And also, sometimes even the legislation is worded the same. This is how it works. Now, the goal is a centrally controlled global Orwellian dictatorship, a global version of Nazi Germany, in fact. And they have certain techniques that they use, two particular techniques to advance this agenda of centralization of power. And the centralization of power comes from the fact that clearly if there's a few of you compared with the population you want to control, you have to centralize decision making. If you don't, there's too many points of diverse decision making for you to control the direction and the outcome of society. Now, these two Americans, because this is the